So good morning, and great morning, guys. Welcome to another fabulous episode of Exit Strategies Radio Show. Hey, I'm your host, Corbin J. Millett, broker and owner of Exit Realty, Low Country Group in beautiful North Charleston, South Carolina. So for you all who have been tuning in, who have been listening to us, not only local in the Charleston market, but from around the globe, those who are catching us on the radio, you just happen to land on the dial of WJNI 106.3 FM as you're passing through the area. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and being on the show with us today. Our mission here is very simple at our show. That is to empower our community through financial literacy and real estate education, guys. That's what we do. We help people build. We help people create. We help people further, quote unquote, their legacy for their children's children, so on and so forth. That is what we do. And guys, we're always excited to bring this content and this information to you. So for those of you who are loyal listeners, have listened to us for a while, those who span from the coast all the way up, I tell people all the way out to Monkey's Corner. That's where my mama live at. Look here, I appreciate you and love you. I love you so much. So guys, you know what we've been doing here with this show. We have been elevating. We've been working to bring you the best. We've been working to make it better. And you know how hard that work can be. But today, look, guys, we're going to make it look easy, even though we know it was real hard. We have an amazing guest with us today. I'm so humble, so honored. Look here. And behind the scenes, behind the curtain, we had a little bit of a conversation. And I'm so intrigued by this concept that we're going to talk about today. So we have none other with us today than M&A. For those in business, you know what that means. Merger and acquisitions guy. He is like the guru when it comes to this stuff. A distinguished expert in this field. Yes, you heard it. Expert. With a wealth of experience in both acquisitions as well as entrepreneurship. So guys, I want you to get your thinking cap on. He has a career that spans over 30 years. He has turned business aspirations into reality through his highly regarded program, How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price. Look here, he hit me with this one. He is the founder of DIOMO, which stands for Do It On My Own. So look here, he's going to teach us. He's going to preach to us. He's going to lay it out. And I'm so honored to have with us none other than Mr. Richard Parker. Richard, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for that magnificent introduction. I will do my very best to hit a fraction of that grandeur. My God, thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here with you, really. I know we looked a little bit about your show, and we chatted a bit, and so I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Richard, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. For those of us in business, we have this conversation often about mergers and acquisitions. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, but I want to start with what I always like to set as somewhat of a foundation. If you could give us who you are, high level, and what it is that you do, and we're going to dive in from there.
Sounds perfect. So hopefully I won't bore your listeners. I've been in the world of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, for 34 years. And for those individuals that are listening, that term may seem a little complicated or what have you. It's real simple. Buying and selling businesses. Everything gets a fancy name in the world of finance. That's what this is. Buying and selling businesses. End the story. And so it's, when I say everything gets a difficult title, it's a complex world, but it's a ridiculous amount of fun. I've been doing it for 34 years. I grew up in Canada. I'm living in Southeast Florida. I've been living here for 28 years. I started buying businesses when I was 29 years old, living in Canada. I didn't have a choice at that point. I made this horrific mistake of buying stock in the stock market on margin and blew pretty much all my money at that point. I was 29 years old. I blew $60,000. I was making $72,000. And so I realized pretty quickly, I might dig myself out of this hole. I was digging further. I've got to figure out a way how to get out, and realize that the only way I'm going to do this is to put myself in a position where there was no cap on my earnings. And I was thinking about maybe taking whatever money I had left and going to Las Vegas and putting on 17 black, but I'm not a gambler and I don't buy lotto tickets. So those two options were completely off the table. And then recognized that I had to get into my own business, and realized pretty quickly, actually, that rather than start a business, buying an existing business, because I needed an income stream. My then wife was pregnant with our first child. I have 4 children, 1 grandchild, but realized the startup I mean, I didn't have the luxury of time. So by buying an existing business, my understanding at that point was I could get into it. And if I buy something that's pretty decent, I could start extracting an income right away. And that's how my journey started out. And I subsequently have bought 13 other businesses and one co-investment and a wide range from like $50 right up to over $200 million. And so for those people that are just starting out, I've been in exactly their shoes. Then started getting a bit of a reputation for helping people or knowing this space. And that led to some people contacting me and helping them out. And I always did it for free. I just loved this space. And then I came across one acquisition that I decided to bow out of because I was in my due diligence, and the deeper I looked, the more confusing it got. It just was like a plate of spaghetti. I just couldn't figure out this business. And I decided to back out. And I remember thinking to myself, and this was shortly after I relocated to Florida, said to myself, the average person who didn't have the benefit of many businesses. I mean, I'm not that smart. I've just been doing it a lot. And so I realized that the average person, they would have bought that business and it would have been hell. They would have been a disaster. And so I spent the next year researching the whole world of buying and selling businesses at the low end for average people that want to change their life, have hopes and a dream, or a small business that wants to grow through buying businesses. And I recognized there was no resources for people out there that really helped them, that spoke to them on a practical, real world level. And that's what ended up being the catalyst for me to build my course, my program that teaches people how to buy businesses. And I did it with the goal of just getting all my ideas down on paper. And even the night before we launched, which is 20 years ago, it's since been updated constantly, of course, my wife asked me, how many think you're going to sell? And I never went into the business to turn this into a business. My answer to her then was, if I can help one person buy the right business or avoid buying the wrong one, that's all I want. That would have been enough for me. And here we are 20 years later. We've sold over 100,000 of the things. We've helped tens of thousands of people around the world realize their dream of business ownership. I still help people. I don't even charge them when they call me. This morning I was on the call for an hour and a half with someone from the United Kingdom who's looking at a couple of businesses. I just love what I'm doing. I thank God financially, I'm in a real good position. So I've devoted the last many years and continue to do so. I just to helping people. And it's brought me a wonderful gratification. And so that's my long, boring story. And that's who I am.
So Richard, let's unpack that. So I'm going to make mention of one thing for our listeners. Guys, look, this is heavy on the financial literacy piece. This is heavy on that side of how we can get our money to do like we want it to do. I have this running joke, Richard, that we don't know how to talk to our money. We sometimes, and that's why we have a bad relationship to it or with it. It's just like husband and wife or significant others, whatever that may look like. That's just like one of them talking at the other person. That other person is going to be offended and you're not going to have a good relationship. It's going to crumble. And that's what happens oftentimes with our money. Now, you hit something else too, because you're trying to get your money right and trying to get it to act right. You got to learn how to talk to it, but you also got to know what to do with it, where you can take it, where you can't take it, where you should and where you shouldn't. And one of the things that we ain't covering that, because you say you don't do it. My cousin talks about this all the time about hitting the lottery. He call it dollar in a dream. He called, look here, every day he go out, he dollar in the dream. I got a dollar, I got a dream. I'm going to go out here and play the lottery. I'm going to see what I win. And that's one of the things that we're not talking about here. It's not chance. It is a strategy. So Richard, thank you for being willing, because what I also know for our listeners, guys, those people that have made it, they want to help other people get there. And oftentimes it is without gratitude. There's a limited sect of people that plug in and they realize that the help that somebody's trying to provide to them and the insight, while there's another sect at times that don't engage and they got something to say about it, but they never get plugged in and they never achieve the dream or the opportunity themselves. So Richard, thank you so much for being willing to do that, because this is all mindset. So mergers and acquisitions, starting business. Tell us about the very first one that you bought. What was it and I know it was nearly 20 some odd 30 years ago when you did it, but what was that first business and what did it look like?
Well, first of all, I agree wholeheartedly. We don't know how to talk to our money. And the other thing we don't know to do is, similar to a relationship, we oftentimes don't know how to shut up and listen when our money is talking to us. And so
I love it.
You could add that to the list, but because that's really important as well. And that really lends itself to making sure you align yourself with people that really want to help and mentor you and teach you, and believable parties, right? Going to the right people, no matter what you're doing, you want to go to the right people anywhere and any time that you're getting involved in a new project. So I love that line. If I use it, I promise that I'll give you the byline on that all the time, because I think it's a fantastic line. You got to talk to your money. So my first business was a manufacturer's agent. I was representing, it was a small company. It was in the consumer products business, similar in scope to what I had been doing at that company that I mentioned to you about where I was working. It was consumer products that were being sold to retailers, children's products and infant products. So I bought a small manufacturing rep business, which is, just for anybody who's not familiar with that, companies that supply retailers and distributors, oftentimes manufacturers, hire independent sales reps. They're not their salespeople on the books and W-2 employees. They pay them on a commission-only basis. They're responsible for a territory. It could be quite large. And those individuals go out and represent the product and sell it to the end user, whether it be a retailer, distributor, what have you. But they're the go between the manufacturer and ultimately who purchases that product. That's the manufacturing rep business. And I bought that one. It was about $50,000 or $60,000. And I was able to start putting in some other product lines because I had this stable of clients that were buying various products. And then I started to look to add other products to the mix, because what I've learned over the years is it's much easier to do business with an existing customer than it is to go get a new customer. So I've always framed it to be able to go out and add new products that I could shove into the pipeline of clients. And shortly after that, I was looking at how am I going to build this business, and realized that organic growth is nice. It's wonderful. It's sexy. It's romantic. You get great gratification. You do something, it results in something else. And on positive side, hopefully. But then I said, you know what? That's like banging my head against the wall, because organic growth is costly. It's time consuming, and recognize that, hey, like I'd already done once, why don't I just go buy some other businesses, smaller ones, that I could add on to my existing business, and they would either be complementary, sometimes they'd be competitive, but I could add them to the product mix. And that's really started the journey. And one of the companies was an offshoot I was selling retailers, and it was providing retail store level service for retailers that I added on to my mix. And that company, and again, I bought it for a small amount of money. I couldn't afford to purchase the company. It was in another part of Canada where I was growing up, or where I was living at the time. And so I convinced the owner to throw in their lot with me and become a small partner. And we built that business substantially. So that was the first business with the manufacturing agents. And shortly thereafter, started adding these other ones.
Wow. So buying these businesses, Richard, obviously you can structure a deal any kind of way. They can be cash. You can bring in investors. My imagination tells me that there's a whole sect of, with the right plan or planning, et cetera, that you can bring in financing. So what does that look like? What boxes do you need to check in order to either attract investors to an opportunity along with, or otherwise get a bank to be that investor to structure a deal that works for you and also works for them?
The first thing at the top of the list is when you're acquiring businesses in the lower market, smaller business, Main Street USA type businesses, we're not talking about billion-dollar corporations. There's businesses that are owner-operated or going to grow a little more significantly but at the lower end of the market, it's very important that people understand what the real world is. The banks don't lend money to people with no track record to buy businesses. That's just the reality. And you'll see online some of the self-anointed gurus, right? Telling you could buy these magical businesses, throwing off hundreds of thousands of dollars for no money down and close the deal in 30 days. That's garbage. I tell you, the technical term starts with a B and an S, but I want to be polite because you might have some kids listening to the show, but that is what it is. It's BS to the power of 100. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in the real world. The way I've always structured my deals and what I've been teaching and preaching for decades is seller financing, number one, because that's how deals get done, number one. Number two, that's the only way to validate the information that a seller has provided. You can validate a certain amount, investigating the financials, the competition, customers, etc., but you want the seller to have skin in the game. That's the second thing. The third thing, in the United States, we have a huge advantage. I did a show today, some overseas, and they don't have that advantage. Actually, 2 shows overseas, is the SBA. The SBA will guarantee loans that a bank will make for people for business acquisitions up to $5 million. The leverage is phenomenal. They're stringent terms. They are stringent terms as far as guarantees, and the business itself and the individual must qualify. But even with those, which are some terrific programs, you still want a component of seller financing, in my view, because it provides some additional leverage, number one. And the second thing is you got to have them with skin in the game. That's critically important. 91% of our clients have a component of seller financing. So they're very doable. The other point, when you talked about investors and what have you, again, people need to be realistic. If someone is telling you, oh, I'll back you in a certain business or whatever, you want to make sure that you're aligned with them about the type of business that you're looking to acquire, because when the time comes to write the check, you want to make sure they're there. So you want to bring them into the fold and keep them informed all the way so that you're not disappointed or they're not there to write the check. So there is a number of vehicles that are available, and it's certainly very doable. A lot of people have this preconceived notion that buying businesses are just for big companies or rich people, and nothing could be further from the truth.
It makes perfect sense. So what I just heard in there, and it makes perfect sense, you're more apt, and technically we see this when you start talking about mergers, acquisitions, and things of that nature, somebody who gets bought out, so to speak. So I've seen that in several instances in the real estate world where companies come in and buy out a larger company, or companies trying to get established in a market they've never worked in. They come in and they gobble up or they acquire a company that's already existing. So they automatically get that entire company's customer base and all that stuff. But then they keep on the people that run it, whether it be the CEO or president or whoever, and they keep them on for a period of time, usually 2, 3, or whatever number of years, for them to continue to glean from them the insights that they've developed to grow that business to that point. And it just would make sense in that instance that if I'm a mom and pop, let's say, if I'm a mom and pop, whatever my operation is, and somebody wants to buy me out and they're going to keep me on a salary, then maybe I will finance part of it, because my success, their success is intertwined, because that's the ideal situation. So I'm going to continue to work hard to grow the business. And in turn, they're going to work hard to grow the business, and we both get rewarded. So I'm getting compensated on top of having a payment owed to me or paid to me based upon revenue or whatever for whatever period of time. It's a win-win, right?
It's a win. And in that particular situation, what's really ideal about it, if you're financing the buyer and you're remaining in the business as the business owner, whether as an employee or even a minority shareholder, well, you see what's going on every day. And so if there's any danger related to your note, I mean, you know about it long before it becomes a real problem. Similarly, if there is a problem with the business, as long as you know that it's moving in the right direction, you could provide some comfort and a little bit of a holiday, perhaps, from paying the note to the buyer to say, hey, I know what's going on here. I know that there's peaks and valleys when you run a business. It's not all unicorns and pixie dust. And so you're running in a little bit of a tough time, but I'm able to see every day what's going on. That's fine. For the next few months, don't worry about the payments. We'll pick them up on the back end or something along that nature. So what you've mentioned is this concept of Wall Street ideas applied to Main Street. And that could be a thing of beauty.
That is so true. So let's talk about this. Let's change up just a smidgen, because I know that all this really and truly, Richard, is mindset. So let's talk about, why is this a great time to seize an opportunity such as this?
Personally, I think it's the best time since I've been involved in this world to acquire businesses. So that's 34 years. And that's a pretty bold statement. And the reason why is the market is 100% buyer-centric now for a number of reasons. And you have a lot of your subject matter related to real estate. So you know there's a buyer market, sometimes there's seller's market, and it alters, it moves around pretty quickly. It goes back and forth depending on the economy. But over the course of 20 years, it's 10 of one and 10 of the other. In the buying and selling of businesses, it's generally a seller's market all the time, because good businesses sell fast. There's such a huge pool of people looking to acquire businesses. It almost always is a seller's market. Yet now, because interest rates have gone up, because the economy there's been some declines or uncertainty, what that does is it has removed a lot of individuals and institutional buyers, the big fancy guys from New York with the good-looking suits. It's removed a lot of those individuals as well from the market, because there's some uncertainty. There's not blood in the street, but there's certainly a trickle. Then when you add the fact over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and especially with COVID in the middle of that, a lot of businesses have had inconsistencies. And so it's hard to get a real handle on what are the numbers really going to look like in normal times. Plus you have that looming threat that's been sitting out there. All these economists tell us there's going to be a recession. I don't know about you, but I've been hearing it for an awful long time. I know what the textbook definition is, but to me, it's a recession. When you have less money in your pocket to go buy the same stuff, that's a recession for the average guy, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
So all those things combined, inflation, higher interest rates, which is the cost of capital related to acquiring businesses and leverage, some uncertainty, fluctuations in the business, that's have all led to buyers moving out of the market. And so less buyers equals a buyer's market, because the seller doesn't have the same pool to sell to, so they can't be as picky. And so it's no longer a seller's market, it's a buyer's market. Now, the beauty of all of this is when there's blood in the streets or a trickle of blood in the street, buyers can put together an incredibly favorable deal as far as deal terms, which means financing with the seller. The fluctuations in the business can lead to performance-based deals where you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that's great that you say your business is making $500,000 a year, but 2 years ago it made $750. This year it's making about $6. Now you think it's about $5. Well, I can't bet my kid's college fund on that type of thing, right? Because of the inconsistency. So I'll tell you what, I'll pay you X. And as long as the business performs to a certain level over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, I'll pay you the difference. And that's called an earnout or performance-based deal. So that's very favorable to a buyer, because for years I've been telling people, and I've acquired businesses this way, where I say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'll pay your price. You take my terms, because the money is made in the terms, right? Because the purchase price, unless it's ridiculously inflated, I mean, you're going to own the business for a number of years. It doesn't matter if you pay a little bit of a premium as long as you get a good business. And so the terms are where you really can negotiate now, more so than I've seen in the last 34 years. I mean, not even close.
Interesting.